Good morning, everyone. Welcome and thank you for being part of this webinar for WorkSafe Victoria. As part of 2021 Health and Safety Month, it is great to have you with us. My name is Cameron Ling and I'll be your host for today. Now, while our program of sessions are virtual this year, we still have the same aims of Health and Safety Month that we do every single year, and that is to keep you up to date. The theme for this year is you learn something new every day. We've got a very interesting webinar here for you today, how organisational culture impacts workplace mental health. In this session, we'll be joined by Managing Director and Founder of Corporate Edge, Phil Allison. Good morning, Phil.
Morning, Cameron. How are you?
Very well, thank you. It's great to have you with us. Just as a little bit of background for those who are joining in, Phil, I'm just going to update them what you've been doing, but we're going to get into it in a fair bit of detail when we chat. Phil has devoted the last 22 years in helping organisations create people-first cultures, where the baseline understanding is that we are all human first. Starting from there, we can create the structures, processes, and interactions necessary to engage and care for our teams. And that has to be good for organisational mental health. Phil has worked with a number of companies, including Virgin Australia, Westfield, and iCare New South Wales. Phil, as I just mentioned there, you do have a great deal of experience and a terrific reputation for helping to enable people-first cultures. For our audience this morning, what does this mean exactly?
Thanks, Cameron. People-first cultures is something that we've been really passionate about for a long time, and it really comes as we've come out of the 20th century, to be honest, and out of the industrial era and moved on into that sort of, that's what we're calling now the social era. It's around people being, or organisations looking at people as human first. You know, we went for a long time there where we really saw people as assets. You know, we had things like human resources and human capital and assets. You know, our people are our number one asset. And we really did dehumanise society, I think, and organisational cultures. And so what we're doing is saying we need to be people first. We need to see people as human beings first and not as employees and understand all of those sorts of areas. We want people to feel vulnerable. We want them to come to work and be able to speak up, feel safe. You know, so there's a term, people talk about psychological safety these days, you know, about creating a psychological safe workplace. And that's really about that ability for people to feel vulnerable and speak up.
It's really interesting points you make there, Phil, but if you don't mind, I'd love to drill down a little bit further. What does the term psychological safety mean, and why is it so important as a conscious and deliberate work practice?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Cameron. Look, we think that for a while there, people did not feel safe at work, and we have safety, and obviously, you know, we're looking at WorkSafe here, but from a physical standpoint, but we didn't really look at that psychological safety as stringently, and really people felt that if they spoke up, if they came up with ideas, they might be knocked back, humiliated. If they talked about the fact that they were feeling uncomfortable if something wasn't working for them, if they felt that they didn't know what they were doing, they needed more help. People really didn't feel safe to speak up and let people know because it showed a weakness, or they thought it showed a weakness. So that level of vulnerability just wasn't there. And what we're trying to do and what organisations are really working hard on now is to create that psychologically safe workplace where people can just be themselves, say what they're thinking, say what they're feeling, and contribute more to the success of the organisation.
You talk about people feeling like that, and I imagine everything that's gone over the last 18 months, it's been magnified a little bit, and times are very tough for certain groups. Yeah. Have you got any good brief case studies about a workplace or perhaps a business leader who's doing it right?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, one of the things just more broadly on that is that the most successful leaders that I've worked with here and overseas are all prolific floor walkers. So there's this one thing in common. They walk the floor and they talk to people. And a great example of that is Paul Scurrah. I'm lucky enough to be working with him in a third organisation now at Pacific National. But I first met him at DP World, and then we worked at Virgin Australia together and now Pacific National. And Paul is a prolific floor walker. He gets out there, he meets the people, he talks to them. He really understands culture and the need for culture to drive performance. And there's a great story of him, his first Christmas at Virgin Australia, based in Brisbane there, when on Christmas Day he put on a Christmas jumper, a bit like you'd see in Christmas Vacation or something like that, but and actually walked the floor of the airport saying hello and thanking every single Virgin employee for spending their Christmas Day, helping others. And so that's the sort of person he is, but it also talks to the type of culture that he creates, where people do feel safe, they feel connected, and they feel like they belong.
I'm just trying to picture right now the Clark Griswold type of jumper that he's wearing there.
Exactly.
But no, that is a great leadership story, and I appreciate you sharing that one with us. So while for morale purposes, it makes sense to have an engaged, mentally fit workforce, what do you see in your practice are the tangible flow-on business effects?
What we look at, we think the number one metric for an organisation is engagement. And most organisations will have engagement surveys and they will go and check the engagement of their team. What engagement really means is that people will come and they will give discretionary effort. What that means is that if you think about an employee that has 100% of their ability that they can bring on any given day, the question you should ask yourself is, what percentage are they bringing? So are they bringing 10, 20, 30%, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and what we want is engaged people who are bringing close to that 90% every day. Now, you might ask me, why not 100%? It's like anything else. You go 100% every day, you're going to burn out. So what you want to do is just have that really good speed that you're going at, where you're consistently performing at a high level. Engaged people do that. And so they perform at a high level every day, and they do that a little bit more. They care more. They do everything with a little bit more quality. And what that means is the outcomes, whatever your business is, the outcomes you get are just far greater. Engaged people also, when we think about it from a safety and occupational health and safety point of view, they're the people that will get involved. They're the people that will speak up. They're the people that will make sure that the workplace is safe. They're the people that want the organisation to be successful. They want every other individual to be successful. So engagement is just such an important part of your success.
It's great to hear that having a psychologically safe and well workplace is actually good for business. I'm sure a lot of business owners tuning in today would be nodding their head along with that and thinking, that sounds great. What are the things employers can do to create this kind of environment? So how can they develop a people-first culture that ensures psychological safety? Any tips for our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the simplest thing is to create an amazing culture. And so what we do with organisations, but what we really implore organisations to do, is to really articulate their culture. When I speak to business leaders who haven't done it clearly, and you ask them, do they have a good culture? Do they understand their culture? They always say yes. When you ask them to describe it, they find it very difficult. And they're talking cliches that might be, we get stuff done, we care for our customers, but really they can't describe their culture. And therefore, if you think about working for an organisation where the leaders can't describe it, you don't really know what the culture means. So articulating a culture, that's clarifying your culture to a point where you can very clearly explain to a person, this is why we do what we do. This is our purpose. These are our values. This is what matters to us. This is the way we behave. These are the things we care about. These are the things we focus on. When you're able to articulate that and describe it really clearly, then people get it. Then people understand what you expect of them. Then they can deliver that.
So in a practical day-to-day sense, I suppose, what are the traits of good leaders who value a psychologically safe workplace, and how do they demonstrate this?
Yeah, so there's three things we believe that leaders must do, right? So they're the three leadership traits when it comes to creating an aligned culture. The first thing is you need to communicate the expectations. So I was just talking about that just then. You need to be able to communicate what you expect of people in the way they behave and the outcomes you're looking for. So communicate that. And you communicate. The important thing is you never stop talking about it. The second thing is you need to be able to role model the culture. So you need to be able to role model exactly what you're saying to everyone else. So it's not just do as I say, but it's do as I do. So really, make sure that you're doing all the things that you're expecting other people to do. And the third thing is to hold others accountable for the expectation. So when you see people that are not doing it, just give them a bit of feedback. Just pull them up, tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, that's not the way we do it here, or, I prefer you to do this differently. Because it's really important to let people know, because most times they're unaware that they're actually working outside of the expectations. So the three things: communicate the expectation, role model the expectation, hold others accountable for the expectation.
Like so many things, I imagine, Phil, that the role of managers and leaders are key. They're really great points that you make. I imagine everyone would play a part, though, in any organisation. I work with a lot of incredible people at all levels who I care deeply about. Yes. What can we do down in the trenches, perhaps, to support each other?
So when we talk about culture, sort of the analogy or metaphor we use is the village, right? So we believe that the cultures of the 21st century need to go back to predate the industrial era, back to, say, 300 years ago when we all lived in a village. And so you think about what made a successful village successful 300 years ago, and you find that everyone had a role. Everyone had a role in the village, right? And everyone did their role, whether your role was to hunt, whether your role was to farm, to collect water, put fire, to make clothes, tools, shelter. Everyone did their role. And what it meant that is that everybody had all of those things. Everyone had food, everyone had warmth, everyone had clothes, everyone had tools, everyone had shelter. The kids were being looked after by the elders who were no longer physically able to go out and do the work. And it meant that everybody was succeeding. And there was a single belief that we can't succeed independently of the village. So we can only succeed when the village succeeds. So what does that really mean? It means that we have got to have a village first mindset. So when we come to work, it's about everybody else. It's like a service over self-interest mindset. It's about coming to work and wanting the organisation to be successful, wanting everyone else in the organisation to be successful, but understand that what you do independently, what you do matters, and your part is critical to the success of the entire village, the entire organisation.
You've spoken a lot about engaged people and feeling engaged. I suppose I want to ask, how do we know what an engaged person or colleague actually looks like?
Yeah, so if you look at it from a psychological point of view, there's been three words that describe engagement over the years, and I've changed them slightly. The first one is the same one. Engaged people love autonomy. So engaged people will make decisions. They will go out and do things. They're not waiting to be told. They're not asking permission all the time. They just get on with it, right? So first one is autonomy. The second one is competence. So engaged people are competent. So the first one is I'm allowed to do my job and I get on with it. The second one is I believe I can do my job. I feel competent in my role. I feel like I'm capable of doing everything I should do. The third thing for engagement is connection. I feel like I belong. I feel like I'm part of something bigger and that my work does matter. So the three critical things we're wanting to create a person in the way that they feel, in the way that they behave, are autonomy, competence, and connection. And when you do that, when you get those three things, you get engaged employees. So when you see that, when you see people who are autonomous, competent and connected, that's when you're seeing an engaged person. And
no doubt seeing that would be very uplifting for leaders, but also all people within the organisation. We're getting a lot of questions coming in at the moment, Phil, so I do want to get to them soon, but I want to ask you one more. What is the result of everything that you're talking about here? What does a psychologically healthy workplace look like? You've spoken about the individual. What about the entire workplace?
So here's what happens, right, is when you have autonomous, competent, connected people, when you've got that connection across the three things that you get is you get ownership. So you get a workforce that owns their roles. They own everything they do. They once again, don't need to be told, and they come to work and they believe that they've got to do themselves. They take the initiative to do things. The second thing is they contribute. You get a high level of contribution. So what that means is people have ideas. They care more. They want to make sure that what they do matters and helps the organisation move forward, but they go beyond. They become very proactive. The third thing is you end up with community. right? So you end up with the people coming together, the team coming together as one, and you end up with a community or a village or a team. And so what you end up with is people who take ownership for their role, who contribute to the success of the community. And that's why it really becomes it's such an important thing to create that environment.
It certainly is. No, I really appreciate your insights on those. If you don't mind, I've got that many questions coming in. I want to jump to those, and our audience are keen to know. I know this first question here is one that a lot of people are asking the question. So I'm going to put this one to you. How do we challenge a culture that thinks, and that's in capital letters, thinks it's a healthy, safe culture, but actually isn't?
Yeah, so what we're talking about there is awareness. So we're talking here about awareness from an organisational point of view rather than self-awareness. Awareness is really, really difficult, Cameron. A lot of people don't realise that we're actually subconsciously driven. What that means is our subconscious creates most of our behaviours, and we think that we know how we're behaving and we think we know what's going on, but most often than not, we don't. So what we need to do, what we find is we have a saying, and that is feedback is a gift. And so the best thing you can do to challenge is to just give feedback on any behaviours, anything that is working outside of the culture, anything that's, you think is not aligned. Let people know, tap them on the shoulder, don't have a go at them. Just say to them, look, I just want to talk to you about how you're behaving, what you did or what you said that doesn't actually fit the type of culture that we want. But remembering we have to set that expectation up front first. And often people think they've got a great culture, but they haven't described it, they haven't articulated it, and they haven't actually said what it is that we want the culture to represent. And so it's really hard for people then to understand whether they're aligned or not. But once you have that, and once you've got that clarity, feedback, to really let people know whether we're doing it well or whether we're not.
Can I jump in with just adding on to that question when you said just tap them on the shoulder and have that conversation about their behaviours? That can be hard sometimes, difficult for people to say, oh, hang on a second, you're doing this, we expect this. If people are thinking that they're doing all the right things, but then somebody gives them that feedback, what if that creates a conflict within the workplace?
It's a really good question, Cameron, because we believe that when we run feedback workshops, one of the questions I ask is, do we give enough feedback? And the answer is always no. And then I ask another question, which is, why don't we give enough feedback? And people sort of stall on that question, and they start sort of making different reasons. They don't like confrontation is one that always comes up. But the fact is, if you're giving feedback, there should never be confrontation. So if I asked you, why would you want to give someone feedback? You want to give them feedback so that they can get better. You want to give them feedback because you want to add value to them. You want to give them feedback because you care about them. So if you're wanting to add value, you care about someone, you want them to improve and get better, there should never be confrontation. It should really be about this thing where people are grateful. The reason why we don't give feedback is because we're too fearful, as you just sort of alluded to before. And what we have to do is really get over that fear. Feedback is an absolute critical aspect of successful cultures. And when we do it, and we do it more frequently, we get really comfortable with it. When you ask people about receiving feedback, they get a bit nervous, usually because it's not done well, and I'll talk about that in a sec. But when you get feedback often, in a culture where you give feedback often and you get it often, it becomes something you really look forward to. There was an interesting study done, I think it was in the book First Break All the Rules by Marcus Buckingham, and he talked about there was two lots of feedback given to people, some positive feedback and some negative feedback. We'd call it constructive. And they asked the leaders, which of the two pieces of feedback do you think the team liked more, the positive or the negative? And all the leaders said the positive. They really loved the positive. But the fact is, when they asked the team which of the two pieces of feedback they enjoyed the most, they all said the negative or the constructive feedback, because it actually added value to them. It was good to hear that I'm doing something well, but it was better to hear that I could do something better. And we don't think people want to hear that, but they absolutely do. But just one other part on feedback, it's really critical that we do it in a very specific way. So we have a model called PEER, which is ask for permission. Is it okay if I give you some feedback? Then talk about what they've done, the execution. So that is, I noticed that you did X, Y, and Z. The effect of that was this: you had this impact on such and such. The result, I'd really like you to do something differently. And so if you structure your feedback well, it always comes across properly and well received.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Phil. Thank you for allowing me to add to that question and some terrific insight there. Liz asked this question, and it might flow on a little bit about what you're talking about there. How do you demonstrate that your workplace is not psychologically safe? At our workplace, staff saying they're not safe seems to be met with comments about toxic victimhood, not taking responsibility for your work, etc., etc.
Yeah, Liz, that's a difficult situation to be in, obviously, because what's happening there is really fundamentally a lack of leadership by the sounds of it, you know. So, look, all you can do is let leaders know that you feel like the workplace isn't safe. By speaking up, by letting people know that you're not comfortable, you should never feel anything but safe. If that environment isn't there, that's certainly not being a victim. A victim is a person that blames everyone else for everything that happens to them. But if you've got this experience, and that experience is that you are, you don't feel safe, then you should feel comfortable to sort of say, hey, look, I just need to let you know, and basically give feedback to whoever it is that you need to give feedback to, and hope that they can take that on board as being constructive, and that it will add value to the organisation. What we're noticing, though, is that more and more organisations are getting an understanding the need for psychological safety. It's becoming more common, and more organisations are understanding the need to create great cultures. Fundamentally, Cameron and Liz, in that situation, organisations that don't do this are not going to attract the best people. What we know these days is you don't interview people for a job, they interview you. And one of the questions they ask is, I want to know about your culture. I want to know what it's like here. I want to know about your inclusivity. Do you have inclusion as part of what you're doing? Do you create a psychologically safe workplace? And so if you're really wanting to attract really good talent into your organisation, it is incredibly important for you to start to focus on your culture.
And you've spoken a lot about people and obviously the engaged people. That leads to this next question. We've got a lot of people asking it from the audience, and thank you to everyone who has sent it. There's a lot of questions coming in. I hope I can get to as many of them as I possibly can. In your experience, Phil, what are the best initiatives that can increase worker engagement?
So they're not what a lot of people think they are, where you have pool tables or table tennis tables or people shooting Nerf guns and things like that. It's not about the things. So let's make that clear. It is about how you lead. So culture is leader-led. And so if the leaders care, if they genuinely care and want to create a more humanistic environment, that's the most important thing. Then we need to communicate. You need to walk the floor. And I know it's been a bit hard in COVID where we've had lockdowns and things like that and people haven't been in the office. So you need to call people more often. But you need to be able to check in on people with no agenda. There's really simple things you can do where you can ring a person and just ask them how they're going. It's a strange thing when you do it for the first time, where you walk up to someone and just say, hi, how you going? They always want to know what you want. But when you say, I don't want anything, I just, I had a guy I coached for many years, and he was running a European business. And he was in Switzerland, and on his very first day, he started his walk, which he does every single day, and he walked up to one of the EAs, and it's a great little story because he walked up and said, good morning. And this lady was just looking at him, sitting in a seat, just looking at him. And he said, good morning. And then he thought, oh, maybe he doesn't speak English. So he said, guten Morgen, right? And she's still just sitting there. And then she said, what do you want, Mr. Brown? And he said, I don't want anything. I'm just saying hello. And she says, nobody ever comes up and just says hello. What do you want? And he said, I'm going to do this every day, so get used to it. And he tells the story that about a week later, he got within about 3 or 4 meters of the desk as he's walking past. And then she looked at him long before he got there, a big smile, and said, good morning, Daryl, how are you today? And it's this complete shift from this like robotic view of the world to this, wow, I feel like you really care about me. Now, it's just as simple as this, Cameron. If you want people to care and you want them therefore to be engaged, then they need to feel cared for. people won't care if you don't care. It really is as simple as that.
That's a great story you tell, and it's amazing. And even reflecting back to some of my football days, that sort of interaction, those little interactions where it's not about what we're going to be doing on the weekend or game plan or anything, like just conversations. They are so crucial to building that strong, united team. Phil, I appreciate you sharing that one for me. This one, it's a tricky one because you spoke about leadership and how important it is. But one of our questions, and again, a lot of people wanting it answered, calls out leadership a little bit here. Yep. How do you call out coercive bullying by managers and directors?
Yeah, so I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record here. It's about feedback. I mentioned before that people are largely self-unaware. We're not aware. We have this thing where we understand our intent. Our intent is what happens in our conscious mind, that chatter that we hear, right? So we hear all this talk going on in our head, and we think that what we intend to do is going to be what we're actually going to do, is going to become our behaviour, what we're going to do and what we're going to say. But in fact, all of our intent in our head goes through a filter, and that filters your subconscious mind. So if you're saying, I'm going to go and have a chat to this person, or I'm going to do X, or I'm going to do Y, that thought goes back into your subconscious, and it now goes through all the reference points of previous conversations you've had with that person. If you've had an argument with them recently, all that comes up. And then it says, you know what, I'm not too sure this person's going to be responsive. And it creates a defensive behaviour for you. Now, it doesn't tell you that it does this. And so what happens is we actually have a behaviour that doesn't match our intent, but we believe that we're behaving a certain way because of our intent, and we're actually not. So what does this mean? It means that unless people, I've got to say, put it to you this way, there are about 8 billion people on the planet, right? And you're the only person on the planet who can never experience you. Right, so once you think about that, I want everyone to think about that. You're the only person on this planet, or 8 billion of it, you're the only person who can never experience you. So what does that actually mean? It actually means that you don't know you. Everybody else does. So when I ask the question, what's real? What you have in your mind, what you're thinking, you're doing, or what you're doing right now? So if I said to you, what's real now? What I think the experience everyone's having, or the actual experience that everybody's having, everyone will say, well, that's the actual experience, right? And so I've got to hope that what my intent is happening, and that's creating my exact behaviour. But I'm not too sure it is. You can never be too sure. So the experience is real. So what it means is people have the reality of you, and you have a perception of yourself. And the only way you can really know the reality is for somebody to tell you, somebody to give you feedback, someone to tap you on the shoulder and say, look, that behaviour actually isn't appropriate. Or, when you do that, this is how you make me feel. And it's not working for me. And I'd really prefer it if you did this or you did that instead. Feedback is a gift. It is the thing that allows us to grow. It's the thing that allows us to really become aware of who we are and how we behave.
It's a great point you make. You even got me thinking there, Phil, about right now I think I'm nailing every single question that I'm asking you. I'm probably making a heap of mistakes in reality.
No, you're
It's an interesting thought exercise, though. Yeah, you don't actually get to experience you. I appreciate that one, Phil. Another question here, and a lot of people asking again, and thank you to everyone who's sending their questions in. Keep them coming. How do leaders walk the floor, as you say, and communicate with people while they're isolated / working from home? Zoom group meetings do not really seem to engage with people. Hopefully we're coming out of a little bit of that, and we're going to start getting back to workplaces, but there are still going to be people working from home and isolated. How do they, in your words, walk the floor?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Look, it's become incredibly difficult. And for the people that I work with that are prolific floor walkers, they've found it quite difficult because they would normally be able to walk, a floor of a building and get through it reasonably quickly and say hello to a lot of people and get eye contact and all those wonderful things, right? What I mentioned before about that call with no agenda, that's the one you want to do, and actually make a phone call. And that might sound a little strange, because I think what's happening is we're having way too many Zoom or Teams calls, and looking at the screen is really doing people's heads in, and making people not be able to sleep, and it's becoming really uncomfortable. So adding another screen call in is probably not the answer. So a phone call, which is something that people aren't getting too many of these days, from work, just give them a call and then have a chat and just talk about how they are and check in. When you have meetings, check in with people. What we've started doing when we run our workshops is we start the workshop with a psychologically safe sort of environment of rate yourself out of 10. We do this, our team does this every single morning. We have a team check-in every single morning, and they rate themselves out of 10, 0 to 10 on how they're feeling. One of my team the other day said that they had a team of people that are in a workshop, and the ratings were all 3s and 4s out of 10. That just shows you how fatigued people are and how tired, how over the whole working from home, the COVID, the screens and everything else. And it's, being aware of those things and being able to have a conversation, a really honest conversation about how are you and how you're feeling, and really thinking about their well-being. And that being the only agenda item is the best thing you can do right now. But when we start to get back in the office, just make it an absolute point of every morning taking time out of your morning to just go and say hello to everybody. Just talk to as many people as you can. One of the things that, one of the things we always say, when you have a meeting, start every meeting with a chat. You never start a meeting with an agenda item. Always start with a chat. So on every opportunity you can, check in. And that's, the only way, I think the best way at this stage for doing the sort of the virtual floor work.
Phil, you mentioned there a little bit some measurements, the 3 and 4 out of 10.
Yes.
It leads to a question here that a number of people are asking as well. Are there psychological safety culture surveys you recommend?
Look, I think it's a really good question. I'm sort of having to sort of think through. I don't know that anyone's doing them specifically. What we're finding is that certainly the clients we're working, we're asking them to do those check-ins, and it's a simple way of doing it. And people are becoming more and more honest and open about how they're feeling, which allows you to then care for them a little bit more. I would think that there would be, in most engagement surveys, that organisations, that the survey companies are starting to put those sorts of questions in there. But you can certainly glean them, I think, from engagement surveys. But to me, until something does come out, I can't think of any. I'm sure there possibly are. But I would think those check-ins, doing the check-ins yourself, and just asking people how they're feeling, how they would rate themselves. Is everything okay? Is there any support that they need? Asking the right types of questions which enable them to open up, enable them to feel vulnerable, enable them to feel like they can have that conversation with you because you've actually started it. You've opened that conversation up. That, to me, is the most important thing at this point.
I would imagine too, Phil, I'm just jumping in here, adding to this question, the first time you ask them how you're going or is there anything to help with, they're not necessarily going to answer. It might be the 4th or 5th or 10th time
Correct.
You ask that question.
Correct. It's a bit like the EA in Zurich. The first time, not too sure. Second time, not too sure. Third time, okay. 4th time, 5th time, bang, I'm up there. I'm asking you how you are before you're asking me. Because it is. When it's not something you've been doing all the time and then you start doing it, people think, where's this coming from? And they'll be a little bit defensive. They'll be a little bit fearful as to whether you're trying to find something out. But when they see it, and when you say it in a really genuine way, when you say it in a real caring way, because this is about you being vulnerable. So as leaders, we've also got to say, sometimes when we're not feeling right, hey, look, I'm just not feeling myself today. I'm just not quite on, or my motivation's not what it normally is. So if I behave this way, just bear with me. I'm just not quite myself. So if we show our vulnerability, then others are more likely to show theirs.
Phil, this question here goes back to a point you made a little bit earlier and very topical at the moment with people returning to the workplace. You spoke about the virtual walking the floor. Well, this is about people coming back to work. How do you tackle this issue when we are managing the return to the workplace? People will be tentative, worn out from successive lockdowns. How to create welcoming and safe environments for them to come back to?
Yeah, so what's really important is that they can't just come back to a desk. They've got to come back to human beings. So, have a think about, I remember when one of my clients last year had their first day back into the office and they sort of had a mandatory day where everyone had to come back in. They basically said, we don't expect any work to be done today. Just go out and talk to people. And it was a day of meeting everyone and getting to know everyone again and just talking about what's happened over lockdown. This was lockdown last year. And I thought that was really smart. That thing where this can't be just turning back up and expecting people to be fully productive when they haven't seen people for a while. So think about how you can create environments for the team to get together. We're a small business. When we have our team into the office, we have lunch together every single day. Now, we can do that, we're small. So we have the whole team have lunch together and we're not allowed to talk about work. And so we create these little environments where you just get to know each other, you hear about what's been happening, you understand what's happening with the family or the footy or whatever it might be, whatever their interests are. And you get to know them really, really well. And I think anything that allows people to chat is a good thing, particularly early, because they want to come back and they want to connect again. If you talk to people who, have been isolated, they're missing connection. Human beings are made to connect. We're made to go to places and be around people. We pick up the energy of others. I mean, if we're all in a room right now, rather than being on a Zoom call, the energy you'd feel the energy of the audience, right? It emanates from us. And so we're just trying to create that environment for people to connect would be the most important thing.
You're right about that energy. And if we were in the room with everyone, we'd see a lot of hands in the air because the questions are coming in thick and fast, Phil. This one, and a lot, I think, from our audience right now are turning to this question. So the best case scenario and the culture you're talking about, absolutely, but still lots of these questions. If the unhealthy culture is being driven by management and board, who can employees turn to?
Yeah, really difficult. That's a hard question because if you're talking about all of the leaders really don't buy into culture and the board doesn't buy into culture, which is less often now because boards are being held more accountable for culture than they ever have in the past. They're usually just held accountable for the governance, but culture, as we've seen with the banks, banking inquiry and others, and where the cultures haven't been right, people are being held accountable for those now. So we're seeing less of that. Look, it's a really difficult one because if you have no one to turn to, and, I've worked with some people or met people who have asked that question, to be honest with you, if you have a values conflict in an organisation, I would suggest leave. It is really just that black and white because you really don't want to be in an environment where people don't care for you. You really don't want to be in an environment where people just see you as an asset, see you as a way for them to make money and not care about your welfare, to be perfectly honest, Cameron. So if there's nobody to go to, then that's a toxic workplace and it's not a great place to be perfectly honest. But saying that, there's usually someone there who listens and really try and talk to that person and try and find out if there's anything you can do, because you can influence culture over a period of time, but you're not going to change that in a short term unless the CEO comes in and the CEO believes in culture. At that point, it can shift really quickly.
Yeah, that's a great point you make. It would be a tough workplace to work in, but hopefully there's someone there that they can have that conversation with. It's got a number of people asking this question, Phil. You mentioned it before, PEER, P-E-E-R. Can you just please repeat that? They want to get exactly what PEER stands for.
PEER is permission, execution, effect, result. It's a simple little structure, right? There's a lot of feedback models out there, but they don't have the first bit, which is permission. I believe if you're going to speak to someone and give them some feedback, let them know exactly what's coming, right? So, look, is it okay if I give you some feedback? Is it okay if I just talk about that thing that happened earlier in the meeting? Can I just talk to you about that sort of conversation we had earlier today? Because what happens at that point, that permission bit, is it allows them to sort of say, okay, I know what we're doing right now. It actually also allows them to say no. If you know you're about to receive some feedback, but you've just got some other news or you're not quite feeling quite right, it now might not be a good time to get more feedback. So a person might say, look, to be honest with you, now's not a good time. Can we do this a little bit later? Which is fine. You still do it. Just do a little bit later. So permission. Execution. What did the person do or what did the person say? So this is about behaviour. What was the behaviour that the person had? What did you experience? The third thing is the effect. What effect did that have on you or others or the organisation or the customer? What was the effect of what happened? And the last thing, the result. What are you looking for? If you're giving a person constructive, positive feedback, the result you're wanting is for them to continue the behaviour, because you're telling them, wow, what you did was awesome. That question was fantastic. Keep asking those questions. They're really adding value. But if the behaviour wasn't so good, something they did or something they said wasn't so good, give them an alternative. Say to them, look, I'd really much prefer you to do X or I prefer you to do Y. Or you can ask a question, which is, what could you do differently next time to get a better outcome? So permission, execution, effect, and result.
Fantastic. This one, just to finish on, Phil, how do you tackle the unspoken organisational culture, as in the way we really do things around here, especially in a hierarchy, which increases feelings of dependency and silence, not authority?
Yeah. So once again, culture is leader-led. So where you're in a hierarchy that describing it that way, right, where we're a bit more authoritative, that's where people have fallen into the trap thinking that you can manage people. And I'm really clear. You'll hear me talk about leaders, not managers. Managers manage things, right? But what happens is some people believe you can manage people or try to control people, and you actually can't, right? People will push back, and what you'll do is you will destroy engagement. People will only bring 30-40%. They'll become what's called transactional. So from a leadership point of view, it is counterintuitive because it switches people off. But when you're being led that way, when someone's managing you, all you can do, and once again, I'm sounding like a broken record, is to give that person that feedback, because they may not, believe it or not, they may not actually know they're doing that. One thing I know is something I always say when I open workshops and things, is that people are good and people have good intent. That's my default position. I believe people are good with good intent. Whenever I talk to people who have got bad behaviour, they will always tell me why that behaviour is the right behaviour. Their intent is good, even though the behaviour might be bad. And so it's not their intent. People want to do a good job. People want things to work properly. People want people to be successful and happy. So sometimes you just have to let them know specifically what it is that they're doing that's not working for you. Because that's all you've really got, is that ability to create that awareness and hope that they can change.
That's a great point, Phil. And thank you so much for those great responses. And thank you to everyone who has asked those questions. I'd like to wrap, though, by asking you, Phil, what one point would you like to leave for our audience today about why a psych-safe workplace is so important?
Yeah, it's so important because it creates a caring culture. I just want to sort of emphasise that point one more time. I was at my son's soccer game earlier this year, and one of the fathers sort of said to me, "Phil, what do you do?" And I told him. He goes, "Wow, what would you say the number one most important thing a leader can do to create a great culture?" And I said, "That's just simple. That is care." So we've got to create a caring culture, one that has, therefore, a high level of inclusion. We want people to feel like they belong, people that feel that they can speak up, people that feel that they can be vulnerable, people that feel that they can contribute, people that feel that they can be connected to something more important, people that feel that what they do matters. It's not just a job. What they do makes a difference.
Phil, it's been wonderful talking with you today. I feel uplifted, and I certainly have a clearer picture in my head about what a really good quality, psychologically safe workplace looks like. So thank you so much for all of those messages and insights that you've provided today. We really appreciate it.
Cameron, it's been an absolute pleasure, believe me. Thank you.
No worries at all. All the best. Thank you to Phil there. And don't forget the WorkSafe Victoria website has a heap of great resources as well, guides and tools that can help you. WorkSafe is always helping to ensure Victorian workers are supported to get through these tough times and, as Phil's been talking about, to stay psychologically safe. That finishes up our webinar today. We hope that you found it an interesting and informative session. And just something to remember, really importantly, if you have something urgent that needs attention, the WorkSafe advisory line is there and the emergency line, so jump on, please. And we're going to note on the screen shortly a list of all the contacts that we've talked about today that you may find helpful. If you have any requests for further information, we recommend you to please get in touch with us. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and all the best.